we wanted to see, as I say, the size of the problem across the whole of the clinic, who we should treat and how we should treat them. And is there then a link to the mitochondrial problem? So, did these people have mental health problems because they're affected by their mobility problems, they're affected by the hearing problems, or is it something more inherent about how these mitochondria are providing energy for their brains to work, and that's affecting their mood? And we've decided to expand on the preliminary study we did last year. And part of that was the big novel of questions you got fairly recently. And we've expanded on that by involving our psychiatry colleagues. And we hope that the results of the studies and the questionnaires that you've completed will be very helpful in addressing that when it comes to running the clinic. And related to that is a study that has been ongoing with Claire, one of our MRes students, and she has been looking at a small subsection of the clinic population who have some difficulties with their cognition, and she's done very detailed cognitive assessments on them. So having thought about depression, we then have to think about the quality of life, the nice touchy-feely bit of mitochondrial disease and how we can improve that quality of life. So unless we know what the problems are in terms of quality of life, it's very difficult for us to then try and address the problem. So the first thing in all of these studies really is to assess the size, the scale of the problem, what is the problem? Okay? Are people very badly affected, as I say, by problems with mobility or indeed fatigue? Is that the overriding problem that most people experience? And while we get a flavour for what that is when we see you in clinic, unless we collect that information systematically, we can't really begin to address the problem or understand what the problems are. I'm afraid, again, this is done by questionnaire. You'll notice the quote I've put at the bottom. We are very conscious that we are asking you to do a lot of these questionnaires, but they are extremely helpful. And Mark Cadogan is over at the back there. He's raising his hand. Fellow Irishman, much stronger accent than me. And then just to come finally to donating tissue. As I say, our lab has been working for the last 20 years on mitochondrial research. Most of that has been laboratory-based research. But laboratory-based research on tissue that has either been donated at post-mortem by patients or on tissues that we have obtained through muscle biopsies. And that has proved extremely helpful in terms of developing the mitochondrial service, in understanding mitochondrial disease, in understanding why it affects people the way that it does. And these are the sorts of tissues that we commonly take and commonly request. Blood in the clinic, skin biopsy sometimes in the clinic, sometimes at the time of muscle biopsy here in the middle. I'd just like to leave you with a list of people that are involved clinically with a lot of this research, and to think about how you can help us and how we can help you in terms of the research. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bobby. One of the things that kind of I think is important is, I mean, how much do you think we could, through this research, improve people's lives with mitochondrial disease?
I think we have an opportunity to make an immense improvement in the quality of people's lives through this. I think we're not currently addressing a lot of the clinical issues that affect you, partly because we haven't recognized that that's a problem, partly because we don't have an idea of the scale of that size of that problem. And I think having a better grasp of that problem will allow us to address it, perhaps by involving colleagues in different clinical specialties, perhaps by acting earlier in the course of the illness to prevent. As Andy has already said today, prevention is better than cure. We do act early for conditions we can anticipate, like the cardiomyopathy that some people develop. And I think that will be true of these areas as well.
And this, even the collecting the information about the people's illness and the cohort study, I mean, say, that should not only help our current people who've currently got it, but also for the future.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be an invaluable resource to have characterized patients and have documented in great detail all of the clinical problems that they have, but then also have the sort of genetic background in which that's occurring, and being able to marry up the two things. And then have that as a resource going forward, so that when treatments do become available, we can then identify patients very rapidly who will need, or who could benefit from perhaps being involved in a clinical trial, and approach them then at that stage and say, would you like to be involved in a clinical trial that may help prove or disprove the benefits of a particular therapy?
Okay, and just so people who've not, who don't, who haven't, you know, got the kind of medical background, I mean, all advances in medicine now that patients have all got to be done through clinical trials, haven't they?
Absolutely. Yes.
So if we're ever going to introduce new treatments, they've got to be considered by a clinical trial. That's right, isn't it?
They absolutely have to be, and that's the reasons for that are manifold, but one important aspect is to protect you as well, that actually going through a systematic clinical trial is the best way to assess a treatment. We can look for complications of that treatment, we can look and systematically identify benefits of that treatment and compare those to the current best practice.
Okay. And people will often hear about, on the news, about this regulation body called NICE, which regulates treatment, and to get drugs through NICE, you've got to present this sort of clinical trial information. So it is a very important part of what we do, is if we want to improve people's lives with mitochondrial disease, we've got to be able to produce evidence that the treatments are beneficial. Otherwise, it simply doesn't get, we can't prescribe it, can we?
We can't prescribe it. And again, I just come back to this point about consent. We can't do that without your consent. It's kind of circular in that you give us consent to carry out these studies, with the hope being that we can translate those studies into benefit for you. We can't guarantee it'll be a benefit for you individually, but for the group of patients with these conditions.
Okay. What I'm going to suggest now is we've nicely laid out the tea, so I think we should stop now, so thank you very much, Bobby.